anyway. But.
Well, we just come here to fellowship.
Yeah, I hate to work more than my contract calls for.
Right.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And thank y'all for coming. It's a pretty day, but it's gonna be a chilly, windy day. And yesterday was so hot you couldn't hardly stand.
It's the first day of spring today.
I thought that was like 21st. They moved it.
It used to be.
When did it change it?
I don't know, but I thought it was too, and I always had it. And then now it's
The 20th.
at 11:33.
Well, we ain't spring yet then.
No.
We got an hour and 23 minutes. All right. But the lesson this morning, I'm in the, like I said last week, I'm in the Adult Bible Studies book. Show that to the camera. I know nobody can't see it. We're in Mark chapter 10. And it says the purpose of the lesson is to recognize and witness to the radical nature of God's kingdom. Well, in this part of Mark, in his version, and Mark is all the way through is kind of hard on the disciples. He makes them look stupid. And they are kind of stupid, but they're no more stupid than any of us would be if we were hearing these kind of radical things Jesus is saying. And in the scripture, Jesus doesn't say everything out in plain language exactly. So I can't really blame them or judge them like Mark seems to have already done. But I don't think any of the disciples understood what Jesus' mission here was about until after he was resurrected and they saw that he was resurrected. I don't think any of them quite knew what was going on. They really and truly thought this is going to be he was going to come in and take over and be the king of Jerusalem. Well, in this particular passage, verses 35 to 45, James and John come up to Jesus, and this is in the preceding verses. If you go back and read, Jesus has explained for the third time why he was here and his passion, what it would be, and none of them still don't get it. So, like I said, they're at the edge of Jerusalem. They're fixing to go into Jerusalem. So most of all the disciples think that he's going to come in and people are going to rise up and they're going to overthrow their rulers and start over again the ancient kingdom of Israel. Well, James and John, they come up to Jesus like, Jesus, can you do this for us? Can you do us a favor? And he says, what do you want me to do? They said, allow one of us to sit on your right and the other on your left when you enter your glory. And Jesus said, well, you don't know what you're asking for. He said, can you drink the cup I drink or receive the baptism I receive? And they said, oh yeah, we can. And Jesus says, well, you will soon enough, but I can't give you to sit be at my right or left hand. He said, that's already for those that are noted down for that. And then the other disciples got mad when they heard him talking about this, and because they're mad because his 2 of the 12 wanted to get special favors, wanted to be number 1 and number 2. And so the other disciples got mad and went to fussing. And Jesus said, Topsy, you know that the people that rule in Gentile kingdoms, you know, they show off and make sure everybody knows they're in authority. It's just like if the president of the United States goes somewhere, it's 5-6 days worth of news coverage about it. He couldn't sneak nowhere because he got 500 people all around him making a big fuss. And Jesus is saying, well, these people act like that. They want to make sure they're seen everywhere they go. He said, that's not the way it's going to be with you guys. He said, whoever wants to be my number 1 follower is going to have to be a servant of all the rest. Because Jesus said, I didn't come here to be served, And he's telling them again, I didn't come here to be a king in the secular world. He said, I came here to serve and to give my life to free as many people as possible. Well, so they're puzzled. They don't quite get it. Well, when John and James asked Jesus for this favor, Jesus said, do you think you can drink the cup I drink and take the baptism that I'm going to take? And they're like, sure we can. And what he was talking about, if you remember later in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus asked God twice, is there any way you can take this cup can be taken away that I don't have to drink from it? He said, if it's possible, please let that happen. And so that's the cup. The baptism was being beat half to death and hung up on the cross. And I think most all the disciples, if you read in history later on, they all met pretty much the same fate that Jesus met. They were all killed for preaching the gospel. And so Jesus told them, so you're gonna drink the same cup I drink. But they didn't get it. So, and you know, when Jesus was hung up on the cross, and that was when he began to come into his glory. On his left and right was two thieves that was going to be crucified. You know, that they drew lots and they freed one thief and hung Jesus in the middle, and they hung one on the left and one on the right. So James and John didn't realize what they were asking. So the point of the lesson is to show that Christ's kingdom is not what we think of as kingdom. They call it a Topsy-Turvy kingdom is the title of the lesson. Well, Topsy-Turvy means all confused, flipped upside down. And like Jesus says, if whichever one of y'all wants to be number one on God's list, it's going to have to be down at the bottom helping other people. And like Christ said, I came to give my life to free other people. So that's not like a king like, most everybody was thinking about. And as things had gone along, up to this point and after this point, as Jesus began to speak more openly about what his glory would be, his passion that was coming up, people began to drop away from it. Because what they wanted was a revolution and a takeover. But that's not why Jesus came. The revolutions and the takeovers are human things, secular things. And when Jesus actually does his takeover, that's going to be when he comes back to earth with the angels and and the army of heaven, I guess you would say, to cleanse the world. Well, I believe this is a communion Sunday. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when we drink from the cup and eat the bread, we think about the Last Supper when they had the wine and the bread. Jesus told them, drink of my blood and then eat of my body. When we think about that, think about this time here when he drank of a bitter cup and had a bitter baptism. And, it kind of makes it, when I think about it, it makes me sad a little bit that this is what God has had to do to try to redeem all of us. That we're all that far from God that there's no way we can get there. We had to be dragged there, more or less, I guess you would say. So, there's some sadness there. But it's also hope, because we know that by drinking this bitter cup and suffering this terrible baptism, Christ overcame death and overcame sin. He overcame all the sins that were committed against him by all these people. And they thought they had got rid of them, but they hadn't. And, that should give us hope and happiness for the future, that there is a future for God's people and a future for God's world. But it's not the future we kind of think about sometimes. And it was interesting. I don't usually look at the 700 Club. Y'all know what that is. I generally don't look at it. They're a little bit too political in their religion for me. But I was waiting for the Simpsons to come on that same channel the other day. And they had this, I guess he was a rabbi because he was dressed with the yarmulke and he had the weird long sideburns, thing like, I don't know the different sects of the Jewish faith. I know very little about it, but I'm pretty sure he was a rabbi of some sort. And he was talking about, I don't know how they got to it. I came in the middle of the conversation. Don't know who he was, but he was well spoken. And he was talking about how so much is preached today to people about a God who would give us whatever we want. Because we're like James and John here. We want the best seat. We want the best food. We want the best of everything if we can get it. And even if we got to go around somebody to get it. And if they get less, well, that's all right because we got what we want. And he said that it's preached in so many churches and on all these television preachers. He said that God is here to fulfill our wishes, that we're the center of it, and God's just there to help us instead of God being in the center of religion and we're there to help him. And he said, what they teach now, he said, it's completely upside down of what the true Jewish faith and what all our teachings tell us. That God is the center of the universe. He's the center of our worship, of our lives. And our duty is to worship God and to try to serve God. And I mean by trying to serve God is to be an example of how Christ would treat people to the rest of the world. I'm not one to stand on the street corners and holler and try to preach at people. I'm not even comfortable talking about religion to people or about Christ unless it comes up anyway. I'm not comfortable going in a group and starting that conversation. And a lot of that reason is because when I was in college, they had the Campus Crusade for Christ and they had the Navigators. And they were Christians, but they were very militant. Not militant, that ain't the right word. They were very pushy. I thought pushy back, because they would just come up to you, and you tell them you didn't want to talk about it, and that wouldn't do no good. They would come back and come back and come back. And I had them come to the dorm room like 10, 12 times, just day after day. And finally, you had to insult them to get them to stop. And so, for that reason, I've never been comfortable.
But that's the evangelist.
I've never been comfortable in that role. I can try to do it by example, but I will not open that conversation with somebody. And if it's if the conversation is there and I wind up in it, I won't argue with somebody about it. I'm just not comfortable in that role. And I got so far off my point, I don't even know what I'm talking about now. But
about the rabbi and how we live.
But we think, and this is not nothing to do with the Campus Crusade for Christ or the Navigators or any of them. This is to do with our relationship with God. And again, the rabbi that I was mentioning on the 700 Club was saying that so many churches now preach upside down the way it's supposed to be. Well, I thought about that when I opened this book and saw a Topsy-Turvy kingdom. So Jesus is saying the same thing. He said, we're not here to be served. He said, we're here to serve. And to me, that's kind of exactly the same thing this rabbi was saying. That, again, the way our relationship with God is set up, we want it to be like we're the center, like we're the reason God is here. God is here to help us get through the world. But it ain't that way. It has to be the other way around. We have to, like Jesus said, if you want to be high up the list, you got to put yourself down the list. So to start doing that, before you can humble yourself to other people and try to help them, you have to first humble yourself to God. He is the creator. He owns us completely because he made us. And even after all these thousands of generations have been, the fact remains that we're still God's. And we have to acknowledge that and acknowledge that he's up there and we're down here, not the other way around. And to serve him again, getting back to my point where I was at, was we're to show the rest of the world how Jesus wanted people to act, by acting that way. And not do things so you can get the first seat on the right hand and left hand, because we ain't going to get that. We'll be doing good to get in the door. But our mission as God's people is to act like God's people. I mean, it's that simple, and I'm being repetitive. But our lessons are kind of repetitive because we talk the same thing over and over and over, pretty much. You can, slant the topic a little bit on that, go down this path or that path, but it all comes back to the same path, is that we belong to God. And part of our worship has to be service. Because I like to quote James, but James always said, you can have all your faith, you can do all your rituals, he said, but if you don't do any works through that faith, then your faith is dead. And Paul said the same thing in not so many words. Well, no, in a lot more words, but it sounds different, but he's saying the same thing. And they're saying the same thing that Christ said, is our mission is to serve, not to be served. So, when we take that communion again, we can think, and every time we take it, I believe we should be thinking about this cup of wrath, is what they say in the Bible. This cup that Jesus had to drink, and what it means, and what he went through for us. And, we don't have to go through that. We're blessed to not have to die for our faith. But we need to, since we're going to not be killed, we need to live for our faith. We need to live for God. We need to be of service to the rest of the world in whatever ways we can. I believe that's the point of this lesson, as it is of all the lessons that we study, because that's what being a Christian is about, is being a servant of God. Anybody want to add anything?
How many of us would do what Christ did?
I wouldn't if I could get out of it.
Nobody would want to do that. Would you want to die for me? I wouldn't want to die for you.
I wouldn't want to.
No, right.
I might would, but I can't say, but I wouldn't want to. There are cases, people who die to protect someone else.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's probably the greatest sacrifice you could make.
Well, it is. It's the last thing you can do.
I always think about A Tale of Two Cities. that Charles Dickens wrote. It's a Baptist thing.
But I mean, Jesus owns us. He owns, this is his world, not ours.
That's true. But we make it ours
Yeah.
because we don't think about God.
And we say, gimme, gimme, gimme.
And, it's not a new thing. We look back in the Bible and all this has been going on forever. Or since there was two people in the world. But,
Well, that's the sin that we have.
yes, it is. And it's a difficult job. It sounds easy to just talk about it, but it's a difficult job. Because we have to put our own thoughts of ourselves aside. And that's hard to do. But that's what we're asked to do.
Like you said, you found it hard to talk to some people about it. I can't go up to somebody and just start a conversation. Are you saved?
I can't do that either.
Now, we might be talking and somebody says something about a church service or something. I might say, well, where did you go to church at? And we might get started on a conversation then. But I find it hard to just walk up. And I know some people just walk up and say, are you saved? I can't do that.
I can't do that. And I really don't care for that. And maybe that's wrong on my part, but I just don't care for that.
Really, how do you know they're saved?
That exactly.
I mean, look at the hypocrites.
Yeah.
Goody two-shoes, and they're worse than you are, really. But you don't know that.
You don't. It's not easy. There's nothing about it easy.
But I think if you're given the opportunity to speak to someone about being saved or something other, I think God wants you to take that opportunity. But you know right off if you need to hush or if you need to keep going.
Yeah.
Well, that's why he said teach your children.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to teach your children. And then they can teach their children, but they don't do that anymore.
Mm-mm.
They're not even kind anymore. Everybody's so mean. Really. Nobody wants to do anything, help anybody. Remember when we were growing up?
No, because the evil that is the world we live in
Yeah.
makes us have to compete with each other. And I believe that's just Satan at work.
It is.
Because, I think God might have slipped up that day. He let Satan come down here and
He's working
go to work.
overtime.
But he's working and makes things hard for.
He's got everything planned. He knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And he's coming back, and we're going to get it, one way or the other.
We will get it. And we may not get it like we want it, but we'll get it. We'll get it one way or the other because he will be back. And let me look forward right quick before we stop. I figured I'd do another lesson out of this book. And because it's more related to Lent, because Lent is about sacrifice and Christ's kingdom is about sacrifice. So the next lesson is from Mark also. Faith to move mountains. It's about when Jesus killed the fig tree. So anyway, we'll do another lesson next Sunday about this. And again, I keep saying this, I ain't y'all tired of hearing me say the same thing. Everybody, people who look at it online, y'all, everybody, let me know, do you like the KJV Sunday School lesson Bible?
Everybody pray.
Because we can do either. We probably continue to do both for about the same cost as, because we don't need that many books because ain't that many people come. So we can get some of both books and go back and forth. It doesn't matter to me, whatever y'all prefer. But anyway, I'm going to be quiet. Thank y'all for coming. Thank anybody that listens or watches rather on YouTube. I think that's where it is. I'm going to be quiet and see y'all next week.